Up next, amid increasing demands, Canada's postal workers are raising concerns about a lack of protections in the wake of COVID-19. Hear from their union rep on what they want from Canada Post, the federal government, and the public. Next. It's an essential service we're relying on more than ever in the wake of COVID-19, postal delivery. And the head of the local Canada Post union says enough measures have not been taken to protect workers and says employees and the public could be at risk. To learn more, I'm joined by Roland Schmidt. He is president of the Edmonton local of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Roland, what concerns, first, are you hearing from postal workers?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Shay. From postal workers, I'm sure everyone could imagine, people on the front lines are quite frustrated and scared, trying to navigate this circumstance. So for postal workers, the issue really is that they're more than happy to help Canadians navigate this crisis, but they need to know that they're being given the proper safety measures in order to do their jobs in a way that it doesn't put themselves at risk, their coworkers at risk, their family is at risk, and then by extension, the public at risk. So what we're seeing is that Canada Post, whether it's at the CEO level or even at the upper management local level, they're saying all the right words about we take your concerns seriously, but then in practice there's a considerable lag about these things being implemented, and then there's been a reluctance to take the feedback from the work floors to make further improvements. So what we would like is just like this ongoing dialogue of we acknowledge that you're saying the right things, but they need to be implemented quickly. Mm-hmm. And once those things are implemented, they need to be taking our feedback as to how we could further improve things.
Well, certainly. And given all those concerns for not only workers, but of course also the public, I guess, what protections or security measures have been put in place so far? And what more would you like?
So far, it's been a very slow implementation of proper physical distancing processes and sanitation efforts. So there's a lot of things that should be implemented, but we want to focus. The workers want to put the focus on just like the foundations right now. And so some examples of those foundations would be in the letter carrier depots, there should be a staggering of start times. So, for example, they should be splitting up the workforce as much as possible. If you have 80 workers in a workforce, in a facility, it should be 20 people on a first shift with no overlap with the next 20 people, with no overlap with the next 20 mm-hmm. people, et cetera, et cetera. And then further, all those 20 people working in their work area, each of them should be supplied with a basic, inexpensive sanitation kit. There's no excuse that these things can't be in the facilities now for every worker. Diluted water bleach solution in a spray bottle, very inexpensive. Disposable rags to be thrown away right after sanitizing the case, very inexpensive. So that would be a very simple example of measures that could be implemented really last week if there was the will to do it, but we're seeing that there's a considerable lag behind it. These things are starting to trickle in, but not to the extent that we need to keep each other safe and by extension the public safe.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they seem like fairly simple measures. What is management saying when you raise these issues?
So when I speak to the top manager in Edmonton, for example, Mr. Kabitowicz, very constructive conversations. He seems like a pleasant man. He seems like a reasonable man. And he says, yes, we take these concerns seriously and we want to implement them. And we are implementing them. And then I will, because we have a pretty robust network of workers talking to our organization, sharing their concerns. That's been like 14-hour days, hundreds mm-hmm. and hundreds of texts, emails, and phone calls of people saying like, hey, the company's saying this. You showed us the documentation of this meeting you had with management. They're saying this, but we're not getting it. So really, it's the last resort for us, but because we want to help the public, but we don't want to be a risk to the public. So postal workers do have the right to refuse unsafe work, and it's a last resort, really. So it's like we keep giving Canada Post the opportunity to do the right thing to help all of Canada navigate this crisis, because more people are taking that advice to self-isolate and doing the proper thing to make sure the pandemic doesn't spread. We need to be sure that we're not accidentally contributing to that problem by bringing potentially contaminated goods into households of people that are following all the right directives.
Yeah, of course, I imagine it must be frustrating. I guess in terms of changes made to the delivery service itself, I guess, how are parcels that require, say, an ID or a signature, how are those things being handled? And are storefronts still open right now for people to actually pick up parcels?
As far as I know, as of this moment, and it could change within the next hour or the next day, our retail outlets are still open to receive people coming to pick up parcels. And that's sort of another example, if I may, to talk about where safety provisions haven't been quick enough. There's no reason that, like we've been pushing at the local level, workers have at some retail counters use their right to refuse unsafe work because they want a protective barrier put up. And we understand that it takes time to install plexiglass in all these locations, but we've also made the recommendation that if it's taking too long to install plexiglass, empower the workers to get some plastic sheeting themselves, to just duct tape it to a ceiling to hang as a barrier. Let workers themselves put up markers to signify proper physical distancing. So the retail windows are open as of now, but that's one of those issues that unless protective barriers are put in place, unless physical distancing markings are put in place, that could become one of those hazard points for like not only our workers, but customers coming in as well as the rest of the public.
Well, you mentioned just how stressful of a time it has been, and I guess it also, the workload must be increasing as well. How much has demand increased in the recent weeks?
It's tough to say specifically, but when I've received pictures and I've was in the processing plant myself the other day, it seems to be close to Christmas volumes. So as people do self-isolate, and this really shines a light on how essential our service is for Canadians during this time. As people self-isolate and they want to have a semblance of comfort, and they want to make sure they're getting their health goods or their dry goods, because people are afraid to go to grocery stores in some cases. They're really counting on us to make sure that we provide that service, and we just want to do our due diligence to make sure that we're not inadvertently bringing a contaminated parcel. So that's why we're really insisting. We're not doing this to be difficult. Like, ignore the fact that I'm a union rep. I have the opportunity to share the concerns of the workers, and I'm just doing the best I can to get that out there. So really, it's just simple sanitation methods, more regular cleanings, making sure that physical distance is being observed, changing shifts if necessary to make sure that physical distancing is there. Because what we're seeing is that contamination will inevitably come to the post office, and it's going to be the preventative measures that we take right now, or that we have taken up until now, that will be the difference of, say, that contamination spreading between a couple members and then the facility being able to easily do the sanitation necessary and resume production to help Canadians. It'll be the difference between us doing that and, say, contaminating a whole shift and shutting down production, which is what ended up happening in Newfoundland, where two of our members were ended up testing positive.
Wow. Yeah, no, we certainly need to get ahead of this. I suppose on a final note, I imagine your workers are dealing with a lot of stressful Albertans anxiously awaiting parcels. Perhaps a final message to those viewers at home, I guess, just to be patient and compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd have three basic messages. The first one would be for Canada Post. It's just, please, we're not giving these recommendations to be difficult. They're very simple. They could be enacted yesterday. Please take these measures to heart. We've given a timeline that we expect them to be implemented by Sunday, and then from there, workers have already been openly talking about using their right to refuse, but we're giving Canada Post another opportunity to do the right thing. Just a message to the federal government: we're happy to help in this crisis, but you guys really need to step up and make sure that Canada Post is giving you the right information, because I assume they're reporting to you that everything's fine, but take it from the ground level, it is not fine. So this is serious. If you're serious about containing this pandemic, you've got to make sure that Canada Post and our facilities are basically treated with the same standards as a hospital, because that's the potential risk it could be. And then the final message to the public, just please be gentle with us as you see a delivery person out in the community. Don't approach them. Just wait for them to drop off the parcel, knock on the door, and then get that proper physical distancing. If you have kind words for them, just wait till they have that distance and then open the door and say hello. We do appreciate it. This job has been so difficult for all of us, but we're happy to help. But just to be clear, we need to have those safety provisions in place.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and yeah, very important advice. Be gentle. Thank you, Roland.
Yeah. Thank you so much for letting us share our story.
Certainly. That's Roland Schmidt. He's president of the Edmonton Local of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. We reached out to Canada Post to address these concerns and explain what they are doing to protect workers. In a statement, spokesperson John Hamilton said, quote, "We've acted quickly to implement safety measures across our organization, including social distancing in our facilities and while delivering, frequent cleaning and securing supplies. Our efforts are guided by public health experts who continue to say we deliver positive poses a minimal risk. We communicate frequently with our employees and believe the best approach is for us to continue to work together with our union on their behalf, as we've been doing productively across the country.